Ganzak, and this is Motivation U, the podcast. Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak. This is Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the Coach's Podcast Room here at Celebration Point. Just honored to have a great guest here today that we'll introduce here in a second. I'll let him sit there and sizzle a little bit until we get to that point. Just want to touch base on some of the things that we've been doing Dale Carnegie-wise lately. We started a new program here in Gainesville 2 weeks ago. Yes, 2 weeks ago now. I think it was September 8th we began that. And we have one coming up in Lake City, Valdosta, Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville is going to start actually October 13th. If you go to the website, jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, jacksonville.dalecarnegie.com, you can look to see when that is going to get on the schedule. But I had a conversation this morning as I was driving here, and I believe that will be October 13th. So a lot of great things. Spoke to Leadership Lake City yesterday up in Columbia County. What an awesome group. And I believe next week on our podcast, we'll have a couple of people from Drummond Bank that will be joining us on the podcast. So a lot of great things going on, and I am honored to have this gentleman with us today. Exciting. He's in my class now. He's gone through 2 weeks. Yeah. Edward Lavagnino.
Yes.
I got it right.
You did.
Yeah, I didn't put the Nino in there. Nino.
Because it's Italian, not Spanish.
Yeah, you got that. So welcome, Edward.
Thank you.
And your company. Tell us about your company.
So the company is called Gift Certificates and More. Mm-hmm. People started calling it GCM about 5 years ago because obviously gift certificates and more is not the smallest name in the world. So we just stuck with the branding with GCM. And what people do is they download our app, and then we work with about 100 to 120 restaurants depending on the time of the year. And then you save between $2, $3, $4, and $5 when you go out to eat if the restaurant participates in the GCM family. So if you want to go to the Texas Roadhouse, you save $3. If you want to go to Bolé, you save $2. If you want to go here, Celebration Point, work with Medici, Kilwins, L House, Roadhouse, the Keys. So you can go to all these places and save $2, $3, $4, $5, depending what they offer. Yeah,
so I like that. Great idea. Yeah. Great idea. Are those type of companies? Are they around the world or around the country, or is that pretty much unique to what you started here?
So as far as I know, it was unique when I started it. It's not a Groupon, which is a lot of people thought it was at the beginning. They did their thing. It was just small gift certificates. I used to own a restaurant, so I was familiar with that space and the small profit margins. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to go ask, hey, can I get 50% off your deals? Because that's called bankruptcy, right? Mm-hmm. So I started it here in 2011. And now I do have some competitors out of Orlando and Jacksonville and so on and so forth. They're similar, but not identical. So Nike, Adidas kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I have my thing, they have their thing. But the discount industry, obviously coupons have been around since the dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. So that family tree is what I fall under. So, but they're not coupons, they're gift certificates because there's no minimum purchase required. So if you go to Medici, you save $3 on your meal, regardless of what you bought. You can buy the most expensive meal or the cheapest meal. A coupon says 5 of a 25 or 10 of 100, but if you don't reach that 100 or that 25, you don't get to use the coupon. Mm-hmm. With me, there is no minimum. If you get a tea and you have a $3 off, then you get a $3 off. You know, that's how it works. Mm-hmm. So that was my angle, to be different than everybody else's.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So where does Edward start his life? Where does life begin for you, Edward?
48 years ago, I was born in California, in Walnut Creek, about 45 minutes away from San Francisco. And my mom's from Guatemala, my dad's from Argentina. That's what I was in the other podcast. So we have the Americas covered. And then when I was 4 years old, my mom divorced my dad and we went to Guatemala. So I lived in Guatemala from my end of 4, almost 5 years old, till I was 10. And then we moved to Gainesville in 1984, because I was born in 74. And in 84, and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. So why Gainesville? What was the journey to Gainesville like?
The main reason was Mom. Of course, we were kids. Mom said that she wanted to be on the East Coast, and she wanted to go to a place in Florida that had a good university. So when we grew up, we can go to that school, and we didn't have to leave the house if we didn't want to. Mm-hmm. That's what she says. I don't know if that's true or not. I was 10 years old, but she chose Gainesville, and I've been to elementary here, middle, Santa Fe College, UF, and I've been here. And I've moved since a couple of times. I lived in North Carolina, South Carolina. I lived in Jacksonville, but I've always come back.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So this podcast is all about leadership.
Sure.
And it's always been my feeling that you didn't have to have the last name of Gates or Musk or Buffett or Bezos in order to be a great leader.
Correct.
Some of our strongest leaders, and we've discovered that on this show here too,
right,
are living down the street from you.
Yes.
Running the Dollar General.
Yes.
Making an impact on their community and on the people that live in their community.
Yes.
And lifting them up. So I try to find out people that own business, entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
What is your journey in leadership, and what are your earliest memories of leaders that you interacted with? Maybe schools or coaches or teachers, parents?
Yep.
What are some of the things that...
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a very loaded question because it depends. So my first love is basketball. So Coach K is the guy that I looked up to. You know, obviously he just retired from Duke, but he was coaching, but obviously for like 30, 40 years. So he was at Duke when I was a kid. So I wanted to play for him. So I always followed him, the way that he trained, the way that he coached. He got the best athletes, and because a lot of people get the best athletes, but it doesn't mean you're going to be able to get the most out of them. A lot of it has to do with being a good leader. Whether it's basketball or football, Coach Wooden with basketball, Spurrier here with what he did with the Gators. Again, I grew up here, and I remember the Gators not being so good in the 80s. When we had Emmitt Smith in the late 80s, we still weren't that good, even though we had an awesome player. Then he came in here, did the fun and gun, switched the whole mentality, and he pretty much woke up a sleeping giant, and then we became the Florida Gators that people know and love today. So I would say growing up in Gainesville, I saw Joe Cerulli, who started Gainesville Health and Fitness. And I used to belong to Gainesville Health and Fitness when I was in high school. And I saw him grow. He didn't have to tell me because amazing story. Mm-hmm. So he was actually my mentor when I was starting gift certificates and more. But prior to that, I used to own a restaurant, and prior to that, I used to own a basketball company, and I used to own a promotional company. So this is my fourth business. So to answer your question, I have learned from all the failures, because all of those failed, and figure out what is it that I liked, what is it that I didn't like, was good at, because there's some things that I can do and I'm good at. There's other things that I enjoy doing, but I'm not good at. Mm-hmm. So a leader, Joe Cerulli mentored me, is make sure that you can, I don't want to quote him, but the idea was, just worry about you. Don't worry about anybody else. Your competitors are going to do their thing. If you're always looking over your shoulder and focusing on them, you're not going to focus on the goal. So I just started doing my own thing because I started getting competition and different apps and coupon books, this, that, the other. And he pretty much just said, just do you, read, study. He was big in reading, which I wasn't. Even with your course, he's like, everything is about sincerely caring about other people. Read, smile, if it's all about you, you'll never win anybody over because you're the only one that cares about you as much as you do. And if you help other people, then you're going to get blessed.
So let's take it back to early. One of the things in our leadership class, if you ever went through one of the questions they ask in some of our workshops, we ask the same question is, what'd you learn about leadership from your mother?
My mom she had 3 jobs growing up. So she was always the one she actually made sure that we were fed. That we never went hungry. We were poor, but we never went hungry. Always didn't complain. You wouldn't have known growing up how poor we were. So I would say the biggest thing with mom was just do what's right, don't complain, and just do your job. That's what she did. She threw papers in the morning, went to be a school teacher at night, and then worked the Lowe's in the evening. every day. So I've learned from her to just, whether you like it or not, you dealt the cards you dealt, and you can complain all you want, but it's not going to make it any better.
So that's the work side of it.
That's the work side of it.
The leadership side of it. What about so that's more like in management.
Okay.
So management is all about the process of life. It's
True.
the things we do.
Yep.
And the leadership is about the people. In the interaction and the handling and the growing of, the cajoling,
Sure.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
Tell me about what you learned, like from Mom, about how to treat people.
Mom always treated everybody, whether you were the janitor of her school or if you were her boss, with the same respect. That was one of the biggest things that I learned from her. It doesn't matter. Always say hi to people, because you never know who they're going to be. Just because somebody dresses rich doesn't mean they're important. And just because somebody doesn't dress rich doesn't mean they're not important. So you never know. You might as well be nice. So her biggest thing was always treat everybody with love and respect, regardless of their title.
That's
and
cool.
that went a long way
that.
for her, because she actually got into a lot of different roles that she didn't officially qualify for because of her degree, but people enjoyed working with her. So, and then again, she was very much like what you guys say. She truly cared about people. And I think that's what you pretty much say in Dale Carnegie. You can't fake that. You either do and you don't. And if you don't, you should, because it's going to help you out anyway, from a selfish perspective. But from a leadership perspective, if you put your employees first, one of the things that from the course said too is, you criticize in private. And when you give credit to the team, you don't say, look what I did, right? That's what my team did. And I think that's very important, because when we do our food festivals and our golf tournaments, I have 2 or 3 people that work behind the scenes that nobody gets to see because they don't work for gift certificates anymore. They have their own businesses. But without those 2 individuals, I wouldn't be able to do it. So the team is huge, and, being able to thank them, and they know that I appreciate them. So that's really big.
So those years in Guatemala, what
Yeah.
city in Guatemala were you?
Guatemala City, for the most part. Yes, the capital.
In those years, we think of like age 4 to 10, and people go, those
Yeah.
are really formidable years.
Yeah,
I mean,
they
those
were.
are like really important years.
Yes.
And I can recall back when I was between 4 and 10, and the
Yeah.
people that I met, which is a lot.
Yeah.
20 years before you were in that world, One of the things that strikes me all the time is the people that I looked up to as leaders.
Yes.
Who in Guatemala, or actually, let me ask the question this
Yeah.
way: was there a different style of leadership of the people that you saw in Guatemala versus what you saw when you first came here to Gainesville?
It's a good question. To be honest, I remember a lot. Like you said, 4 to 10, it was almost 5. So 5 to 10, you definitely get to see a lot. The way that what I saw, it was a little bit different, because it was the way that it was set up, it was different, because we're very poor. So, but I remember seeing things, but it wasn't so much from a leadership perspective or a business. There's, most of my family were employees. Like my grandma was a teacher. So a lot of them, she led her school, but she was a teacher. She didn't have her own business. Not that you have to have your own business to be a leader, because if you lead people or whatever, you can be a manager and you still have to lead. But what I remember most was just the 2 coups that we had. Is a different way of living. And when I came over here, I really appreciated what we have in this country. Far from perfect. But let me tell you, a lot better than a lot of third world countries. I don't think people realize the difference between having first world problems and living in a third world having third world problems. So what I appreciated, what I remember the most, is just the work ethic, because I would never want to go back to that. Now, they're beautiful countries. It's just the way that, depending on where you stand, structure financial wise, so when you're poor, you're pretty much there's no moving up. Here you have a chance to move up. Like yesterday, Tuesday, Elio talked about he came from Cuba with nothing. I mean, you know how many times I've heard that story? And look what he's developed now. That will be harder to do in a third world country. Whether you're black, white, and different, he worked his tail off and he got to where he is. And he has a drive, and I guarantee you a lot of that drive comes from not having anything in Cuba. It has to. That's where it came from me. So leadership-wise, I would say I don't remember much, but I do remember coming here and thinking, I want to become a leader because I know what it is to have nothing. you know, and you come over here and then you start looking at other businesses. One of the things that I remember is like seeing all these places with names who became somebody, like, you know, all these companies' last names represent somebody. You know, you're like, oh, I had no idea. Like, you know, Lamborghini is somebody's last name, and so on and so forth. And people stamp their name into something, and you're like, wow, I had no idea what this person built. Because when you're a kid, you see a building for what it is, and you know, like, you know, Kohl's and Target, and you don't understand the struggle that came behind, like Publix and the Jenkins family, what they had to do, right? The struggles and stuff like that.
Well, when you read How to Win Friends and Influence People,
yes,
you'll hear some of those stories about that, like how the Pullman car company, how Andrew Carnegie, you know, connected with them, and the importance of a person's name, which is huge.
It is huge.
Like Ford.
Yep.
I grew up in Detroit, so Ford.
Yep.
I mean, it's
Henry.
It's everywhere we go.
Yep.
Is Ford, you know.
And Lakeland, Publix is everywhere. Jenkins this, Jenkins that, because they've actually put all the time equity, sweat equity into building that, and it's amazing. And then you start thinking, like, how do I become like them? What do I have to do that? Because you have the ability to start your business, get a EIN number, and start producing. And I've always intrigued me. We bought a restaurant when I was in my early 20s, and we realized just how hard it is. You know, the group here, Spurriers, makes it look easy, but behind the scenes, there's a lot of work, you know, with Freddie and all the owners, and, you know, there's a group of people who own this place.
You mentioned Freddie.
Yeah.
You had an interaction with him.
I worked for Freddie for 3 years.
Where?
When he was at Domino's. Yeah, I was his marketing guy.
Wow.
Yeah, so Freddie taught me a lot of guerrilla marketing that to this day I actually use to grow my business. Because when you start, like I was saying on the class, you have no money. You know, like the Food Fest, the whole thing behind that was, how can we create an event that people are going to be interested in? How can I give back assets to the community that they will in return reply and want to say, I want to be part of this guy's Food Fest because he gives me an incentive. And that all the way that we did the promotions was mostly passing out posters, which is guerrilla marketing, because we didn't have the money for traditional marketing. And as we're getting bigger, we do more television and radio and print and social and digital, you name it, EDDM campaigns, but those are expensive. You know, EDDM alone is like $4,000, depending what you do. So,
explain that acronym for people that don't know.
Yeah, so EDDM is when you do every door direct mail, and it's a piece of mail that 90% of people throw away. Right. But if you do enough, 10% of people see it, and if the 10% is 1,000 people, you get 1,000 people that saw your product that otherwise wouldn't have. But it's not cheap. It goes through the post office. You have to print it. You know, same thing with obviously television and radio and digital and even Facebook. Facebook is not cheap. You can spend $500-600 on Facebook easy per month. And if you think, oh, if I do it for a couple of months, well, that's $1,500. If you do it for 2 months, it's $1,000. It adds up.
Oh, it sure does. I know. I get my bill every single month.
Yeah.
So, like, did you play basketball when you were younger in school? Did you?
Yeah. Well, I didn't play when I was a kid because, again, growing up in Guatemala, soccer was king.
How about when you came to?
I didn't start playing basketball until I saw Jordan. When I was like, I would say, in '84 was his rookie year. So I started playing basketball about 12 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was way behind the 8 ball.
Did you play in high school?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I went to PK.
What are some of the traits of the coaches that you had that maybe that have transferred to your leadership style?
The biggest thing with that was coaching basketball is like running a business. You know, you got to put people in the right place. So I've learned quickly, in order to get minutes, you have to be able to fit that puzzle. But it's not just your athletic ability, that helps. But it also has to do with your attitude. It has to do with your practice. How do you practice? People say, you know, I'm going to take off practice. I play one way and I practice another way. There's no such thing, you know. So I've learned from different coaches that at PK I had Randall Leith, and he knew the game of basketball. His basketball IQ was insane. Like, I got to the point of running different plays, but you run them over and over and over again. Then when he called that play during the game, you could tell where the defense was set up. So if you think about it, if you were like a business, you can tell what's happening. Like, what do we need to do? How do we put the right employees at the right pieces? And the play developed, and we could see the play developing before it developed because we already knew where people had to go. You know, and sure enough, when everybody did their role and when everybody set the pick the way they were supposed to set the pick, a layup or an alley was always there.
So again, that's the management side of it. That's the process. The process is the X's and O's.
But the leadership was, but he sitting in practice saying, I want you to execute this. This is why it's good for you to do this. It's going to get you more minutes and it's going to get you more points. So he ran the team like a well-oiled machine. We had Chris Doring, who played for the Gators. He was in my team. Went to PK. He graduated a year before I did. But that year, they won state. So he had a bunch of really good pieces that he managed to put together, and he put Chris in the right place. He put Tia in the right place. He had different players that he managed to make sure that he actually led them in the right direction.
Have you ever read the book Good to Great?
Not all of it, but I do Audible. So I listen to a lot of books.
Get through the whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
because what you're talking about there is one of the concepts he had there is, not only getting the right people on the bus,
Yes, I've heard
putting
of
them in
this.
the right seats.
Yes.
That's an important part of it too. One of the things, Edward, that I've seen in my years in business and teaching leadership, coaching, and failing and succeeding, is that we have like a default mechanism in us as leaders. When we're doing public speaking, one of the things you want to do is be careful of what when it's downtime, what your default look on your face is, because sometimes it's angry or what. We tend to do the same thing as leaders. When we get into a stress situation, we like fall back into our maybe sarcasm or one-liners or jabs or pokes.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I see about really successful leaders is that their default mechanisms aren't that way.
Mm-hmm. They're more positive.
Yeah. What are your?
So one of the things, again, we brought this in class. One of the things for stress that I've done here recently is walking. Just going out there, not listening to music, just walking, listening to yourself breathe, and figure out how am I going to fix the situation. Whether it's a programmer that you're dealing with, an employee, or some sort of supply chain issue that you have. As an industrial engineer, we have this all the time. But one of the things that I like to do is, instead of, like, for instance, if I get an email from a programmer saying that he's behind, before I used to get really mad and want to reply right away and say, hey, what's going on with this? You promised me this, this, and this, and you're not going to deliver. Mm-hmm. I've learned that doesn't get you anywhere. When people get resistant, you lose them, right? So I don't reply. One of the things that I was reading about the book too is he wrote this letter and he never sent it, because when you write something when you're upset, it's not going to be anything good, right? Yeah. So sometimes you feel like you need to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help you God. But other times it's like, but what is that going to get me? Yeah. So I've learned, to answer your question about stress, and this is like a recent thing, is the older I get, the better I deal with it as well, is just, go out and walk. And I don't necessarily have to avoid people. I can be in my place, but walking every evening. I walk every evening 10,000 steps. I actually do it here at Celebration Point. And it's helped me out tremendously, and just to clear my mind, lose weight, the other. So I personally think that's a great way to release stress. And even if I don't want to do it, even if it's raining, I go to the parking garage and I walk in the parking. It doesn't matter what it is. We don't have snow in Florida, so I'm lucky because if it was, that would be a different story. But I've been doing it since the beginning of the year, like end of January. That's great. So I think that's a good way of doing it. And other people are different things. Obviously, some people, when they get stressed, they start drinking. My tendency is I eat. So I get to 240, 260, 270 without even knowing, because I'm doing Oreos and not doing that because it's comfort food, right? Yeah. But I learned I can't do that. I need to do something more healthy and do that.
That macaroon went down pretty quick there.
That's one bite. It's a little Oreo.
Thank you.
He says, I'm the victim. He gave it to you,
Yeah. Jason said, here, look at, hey.
I thought it was sugar for your coffee.
I did too. I thought he was trying to give me like cream or something.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was.
I don't destroy my coffee. I like just that raw bean,
Yeah. But too, there's also a balance with this, because I love chocolate. And what I decided, again, this is maybe getting off topic, but in order to like, one of the things
we're learning about you.
Yeah. Right. So, I do Reese's Pieces every night. I used to do 2 or 3. I just do one, not one box, but just one. So I don't like miss it as much.
I was watching this podcast.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things, and you reminded me of that with the Reese's Pieces.
Yeah.
It's not always what we do. Like he was talking about athletes,
right?
So sometimes you start talking about what an athlete needs to do. It's what they're willing not to do.
Yep, that's true.
And one of those things is like eating that piece of candy. another thing he said on this podcast was that watching 3 minutes of news in the morning
Yep.
makes you 27 times more likely to say that you had a bad day at the end of the day.
That's crazy.
You know?
Yeah, I remember you saying that in class. That is insane.
Is that, think about that. That's just one of those incredible thought processes. It goes even further if we take what's in our head
Yep.
and we say it out loud, it has a 10 times more chance of happening.
Yep, that is true. That's crazy though.
But if it's negative,
Yep.
4 to 7 times more chance of happening.
Wow.
So you're talking about 4 to 7 times more than 10, so that's like 40 to 70% more chance of happening if you say that negative thing out loud.
Yep.
So again, going back to that default leadership look on our face or whatever it is, that's important. Or sending that note that you were talking about, because that's you send a text to somebody, it's like talking out loud.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you've sent that. You've
Yep.
given somebody else that message. It's no longer in your head.
Correct.
Now, an email, if you don't send it, it's still in your head, right?
Correct. And I've done that. I've practiced that. And when I do sales for the most part, when I meet with different restaurants and they say no, it's like maybe I didn't explain GCM correctly. Maybe there's something that I should have said different. Sometimes using different words make a difference. Sometimes a word you can use something similar and it doesn't really make it. But sometimes a specific word does make a difference because it's a different definition and implies something completely different, even though there's similar words. So I'm trying to get better at like a craft. Wording is a craft. I have a tendency, especially when I started 10 years ago, I've come a long ways, that, just shoot everything off my sleeve. And sometimes people take that as like, oh, he's very aggressive. I got a bunch of times like, are you from New York? It's like, I know what they meant by that. It's like, so in other words, you got to chill in the South kind of thing, even though I've only been to New York twice.
Yeah.
But
I'm from Detroit. You got to chill everywhere.
Yeah.
People,
you just get so excited and you want to tell the people about your business and this, that, the other, but you got to relax and say, hey, tell me about yours. How
we
can
were
I help
still
you?
given 2 ears and 1 mouth to use in that proportion.
That's true. That's true. That's a good ratio for sure.
And there's a good time to talk and a bad time to talk.
Amen.
You can be assertive and not aggressive.
Yes.
And those things are all. I mean, I coached salespeople for a long time, and I had some real aggressive people, and they succeeded, but it was usually at a cost. There was a flame out along the way, or it was a short. And as a business owner, hey, you're happy because if that's the way you run your business, that is just a widget that human is just a widget in your way of succeeding. And once that widget is burned out, you throw it away and find another widget and put it in there. I never believed in that. I mean, I tried to help that person, maybe smooth out some of the rough edges.
No, I think it's a good idea. And I've learned that when we do the food festival, there's like 12 people that work with me to put that together, and it's one of those things that at first, when somebody didn't pick up the trash, your first instinct is just like, why didn't you do this, that, the other kind of thing, right? And I've learned that all they would do is they would hide from me. They just wouldn't do their job. So I approached it a little bit different last time. And all the restaurants told me, I've never seen my trash can so clean. And the only difference is I said, hey, listen, if you stay active, okay, and you do what you're supposed to do, the incentive is I'll let you eat at the end and I'll pay you $2 more an hour. I had people saying, can I clean the trash can? Can I? And before it was like saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, as opposed to asking them, what do you think, a bunch of kids from U-Hauls, what do you think that we can work together to make it? And everybody told me this has been the cleanest food festival I've ever seen. And it's all because I sat down with the kids ahead of time. I told them what I expected. I asked them what they wanted to do. Like, what role do you want? What side of the trash can do you want? Do you want to be in this? Because we have different sections in the food fest. Do you have a preference? Do you want to be on this side by Nike or by Tommy? And believe it or not, some people did, because they've been to the food festival before. So, and they all worked as a team. I told them, when you're done with your section, that doesn't mean you're done. You're part of the team. You help section 2 and section. So you had all the kids doing their own thing, and they all knew each other from U-Haul, so it worked out like magic. But it was because I sat down and asked him, how can I make this better for you? All right. At the end of the day, we have a job. This is a job. You're not here to have fun. You're here to work. However, as much fun as we can do within the scope of working and making sure that this is clean, then we're good.
When you look back on, well, let's hold that thought, all right? Let's take a break here, and then we'll come back from that.
Okay.
We're live at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, Celebration Point, inside the Coach's Podcast Room. My name is Bob Ganzak. I have Edward with me today from GCM, and we'll be back right after this.
We still hear it. The sound of victory. The joy of being part of something great. And while things may not be the same right now, we haven't gone anywhere. If you bleed orange and blue, then Meldon Law is the firm for you.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back to MotivationU, the podcast. My name is Bob Ganzak. With me is my guest, Edward Lavagnino. Edward owns a company called GCM, gift certificates and more, and maybe we'll touch on some of that a little along the way. Edward, jumping back into what we were talking about, and there was something right before the break I wanted to touch on, and that you said earlier that you had some failures as an entrepreneur. We all know we have failures.
We do.
What were those adventures, and what did you learn from those failures or those challenges?
At first, the failures did not seem like learning lessons, let me tell you. Because when you fail, it sucks. They just call a spade a spade. Then you realize I have two choices, like you were saying during the commercial, glass half full kind of guy, right? Reality is life is tough.
I said glass full.
Full, yeah, I'm saying glass is full.
Not half full.
Okay, full. Yeah,
full.
Yeah. In some cases, it's empty, and in some cases, it's half full, but you want to get it to full, And one of the things that's very important, and you mentioned this at the beginning, is your mentality. So to answer your question is, at the time when we had a restaurant and it failed, my mom had to go bankrupt. There's nothing to learn about that. It sucks. That's just the reality of it. What you make of that is, okay, how do I make sure I don't go through that pain anymore, right? How do I prevent it from doing different things? First is stay in your lane. If you've never done a restaurant, don't just jump into a restaurant, which is a mistake that we did. However, the lesson was I was in charge of the kitchen, the ordering, the firing, the hiring of the back. My sister did the front end with my mom. So when I started gift certificates and more, I can walk into any restaurant and I had 100% confidence that I knew how the kitchen ran, even if they did different things. I knew how the business ran because I knew what percentage, I know what percentage was profit, what was, fixed cost, labor cost,
So you learned from
I've learned from that.
From your efforts in the past.
From the failure of the
What
Lord,
other
yeah.
businesses did you have? I think you
Yeah.
said you had 3 other businesses
I had
before.
a marketing company, which we did promotional items, and we also had the license for the University of Florida, the University of Miami, and Florida State, and we did apparel. Yeah,
wow.
yeah. So actually, I called the University of Miami, the lady in charge of the collegiate licensing, and she said, well, I'm going to be on vacation for 3 weeks, so if you want to come see me, you got to do it tomorrow. So I drove to Miami and back in one day. I sat down with her, I showed her my shirt, she gave me the license. Then I drove to Tallahassee, did the same thing with the Florida State, you know, her Hurricanes, everything catered to them. And I got the license from Florida as well. But I couldn't sell. Once I had the license and we had stitches, just said whatever those 3 schools, they just weren't selling because you had to compete with Nike and Adidas and Tommy and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I was never going to be able to beat those companies at their own game. So that failed. And then I decided, you know what, I don't want to be in the promotional product world. I put logos on pins, and there's nothing wrong with that world, it just wasn't for me. But I've learned how to do a lot of that. And with my current company, I started another marketing company like that one, and I buy all my promotional products to promote to GCM because I already know that space. Mm-hmm. I know where to get the pens, where to get any marketing that I need, like for the golf tournament, all that swag, I buy it for myself because I know where to buy it. Mm-hmm. So I've learned from doing that. I used to own a basketball company, and in the basketball company, we did 3-on-3 tournaments. Like, have you ever heard of Hoop It Up? Yep. So we did a Hoop It Up. We did a middle school all-star games. As a matter of fact, Billy Donovan's son, little Billy, was in middle school when I started Hoops Galore. That's how I met Freddie. So Freddie was one of my sponsors. So by doing basketball tournaments, 3-on-3s, all kinds of all-star games, you name it, when I started doing the food festival and when I started doing the golf tournaments, I already knew how to do the tournament, how to put them together because of all the years of practice doing basketball events. I just migrated that to golf events, you know.
So how do you turn it on and turn it off?
Well, that's hard. My exes would tell you that I don't know how to do that. It's hard. I think that it's depending on what it is that you have to turn on. If you have an event coming up in a couple of weeks, there is no turning it off. The closer you get to that deadline, I can only imagine when you do the SEC championship or the Super Bowl, those coaches can't just say, the Super Bowl is in 2 weeks, I'm just going to turn it off and be a dad. It's got to be in the back of your head. You know, when the beginning of the season, you have the summer and all that stuff, and maybe it's a lot easier. But to be honest, I think a lot of people still struggle with that. When you have to tell yourself, I'm not going to think about this as much. I think in the back of your mind, you're always thinking about it, but at least you make an effort not to say anything to the significant others and to pretend at least that you are putting it in the back burner and not letting it affect it. And if you go to a play or a movie, you actually enjoy yourself. But in my opinion, I think it's hard.
I find it interesting that, you know, I asked you a question and you automatically went to significant other. Mm-hmm. That was where your mind went to, because how do you turn it on and turn it off? It went
because if your coworkers, partners, there is no turning it off because we work together.
But you know, I was watching I'm a Detroit Lion fan, a Jacksonville Jaguar fan.
Oh, the Jaguars are good.
Yeah, again,
Detroit sucks.
You know, so there again, you're trying to win friends and influence people by being sarcastic, right?
Realistic.
All right. You know,
I'm just kidding. I just like to give the lies.
But that's true.
You have the greatest running back ever.
Is that a strong leadership technique? Let me ask you that question.
I think
what
humor.
You just did. Yeah. Humor is.
I think humor.
Was it your humor or my humor? So you just said that. At my expense.
Yes, correct.
At my expense. So it made you feel good.
Yes.
Which comes down to the bully in the room. So do you ever get called the bully? Mm-mm. So, but that's the same.
At least not to my face. So, because I think most people would understand that came as a joke.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that the Detroit Lions for the longest time weren't very good, even though they had the best running back ever, even more than Emmitt Smith, and I love Emmitt Smith.
Yeah. Don't tell me you're a Cowboys fan.
No. Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I'm a season ticket holder. We've done really well, you know.
We won.
We won. I was great. I was there, you know. But one of the things, I was watching Hard Knocks, and not to talk about the Lions, but to talk about Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying, the lady that is the producer for that program, she leaves her house in like the beginning of June or right before Memorial Day. She leaves her house, and she doesn't come home until the Tuesday after the first game of the season.
Wow.
So that this year was what, September something, right? So imagine June, July, August, and the first week of September, 10 days of September.
Yeah.
You give up your life. Now, she had said, it was in a podcast that was, the Detroit Lions did a great job of interviewing her.
Yeah.
Because they put her in front of the camera, and she was taking off, going to Europe for like a month.
Yeah.
Just to,
She deserves it.
to reconnect with herself. But again, I go back to what I said earlier: is what are you willing to give up?
Yeah.
What are you willing to give up to be successful?
And it sucks that you have to give it up to begin with. You shouldn't have to give something up to get something you want, but you almost have to.
Well, an athlete, I mean,
Yeah.
Vince Carter,
Vince.
a great
Insanity.
basketball player. He said in an interview that he when he was like 35, 36 years old, because he played until I think he was 42,
Yep.
35, 36 years old, he stopped dunking. He could still dunk, yet he knew that dunk, the wear and tear on his knees, would add to that. So if he had a layup, he'd just lay it in instead of slam dunk. Now he could have slammed dunk, but
And
that's
for him,
giving
that's
something
hard.
up.
Because that's insanity. He's like, he can dunk, he can fly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, an
Yeah.
athlete giving something up. What
Yeah.
are you willing to give up? Other individuals, it could be something like I don't know, fast food or
Yep.
something else that just does not put your body in the right shape. Tom Brady is,
44, 45?
yeah. But there's a reason that he's that way.
Yeah.
He has dedicated his nutrition, everything that he does. He doesn't fall off the wagon.
Correct. The TB12 thing that he does?
All of it.
Yeah.
He's so going back to what I said is, and you said, you shouldn't have to give it up.
Right.
Why not? I mean, what do you want to go? If you want to be the best, there's some things you can't do.
No, I agree.
You know?
And those are all good examples of athletes. Majority of us will never be professional athletes. So when you talk about the majority of people, what I've seen that they give up in myself is your family time. That's because you only have 24 hours. And if you sleep 8, 6, some people can sleep 4. I don't know how, but they do. You got some sleep, whatever that X is, right? And then you have to work. And when you start a business, people don't care how much you work as long as you have to provide a service, right? So it sucks that you do have to sacrifice your family time because that's the only way to succeed. Now, some people say if you work smarter, not harder, you can get it done. But most people that I've seen who have become very successful, like Paisanos. When I started Gift Certificate to More, I met with Paisanos. Are you familiar with Paisanos?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They had 2 locations. They have 11 now. All right. They grew during the
one in Lake
pandemic.
City.
The one in Lake City or Orlando. They have one in St. Augustine. So they're growing. But the guy works his tail off, one of the owners. I call him up, hey, do you want to do this food fest? He's like, I'm in Orlando. I've been staying in a hotel for 2 weeks. He's very successful. He's financially well off, I'm sure. But he still had to sacrifice that time.
What is successful?
For different people, different things. I was thinking business successful means your company's growing and there's money in the bank account. Mm-hmm. That's what I think success. As long as your company's growing and you have money in the bank account, and that delta has to be there.
But if you lose your family, are you successful?
Correct. No, that's a great question. The problem is nobody goes into it thinking they're going to lose their family, right? Nobody says, "Oh, I'm going to start this restaurant. I'm going to lose my family." I'm okay with that. But life happens. You got to give. You got to do this. You got to do that. You're going to miss little Billy's soccer game. You're going to miss this. You're going to miss that.
So, one of the things I've noticed is that status quo is like what we think of, like just the way it is, right?
Yeah.
But when we think about change,
Yep.
we tend to think as humans what we're going to lose and not what we're going to gain. I don't know.
Do you think a lot of it's because at first you lose, you don't gain till later? Very few people gain success right away.
But I'm thinking of like in a personal relationship or in a business. Like I'm working at a job,
Right.
And I really hate what I'm doing and everything else. But I've got a house payment, a car payment, and everything else, and so I don't want to. I'm not going to leave this job. And you
Right.
stay there, and all of a sudden you're 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 years into this job, and you're like, I'm miserable.
Yep.
Because I think a lot of people think like I'm going to lose all that. But they don't think of what they could gain.
Right.
What is on that other side, of what they could
Yes.
attain. And I think kind of what you were talking about, because, I've worked long hours, and there's so many items there. I'm trying to get back to that. It's not the quantity of time you spend with your family, but the quality might be.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we talk about success, I've always challenged people to the fact that I had a buddy who was a UPS driver.
Mm-hmm.
Bill is his name. Kathy is his wife. He worked hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's in Wisconsin. You drive a UPS truck in
Snow.
Wisconsin.
Snow.
Part of the year is pretty rough.
Oh, yeah.
Part of the year is really nice. Bill probably never made $100,000 a year. He had a nice house. Took care of his car, saw his family every day. He had dinner with his family every night. I would argue that he was more successful than most people.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
So
Sometimes we have to decide what do we want to do. I mean, you choose that path. You can also choose the path to say, my family's more important to me than money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do I need 11 pizza places?
Right.
If I'm dead at age 55,
Right.
how successful was I?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things with that. So Steve Harvey says the best. Eventually you're gonna have to jump. That's what he says, right? As an entrepreneur. Some people, I don't know if you're born with entrepreneur gene or you're not. It's debatable. Are you born a leader, not a leader? It doesn't matter. Some people can create themselves. But if you want to have your own business, if you have that fire in your soul, no one can turn it off. You can ignore it, and that's what people regret if they have that. I know majority of my friends thought I was insane with an engineering degree doing a coupon app. Back then, they weren't even apps. It was just websites. They're like, you are the stupidest guy. Security, they all have, to this day, they'll make a lot more money than I make. They have security. But I didn't do it just to make more money. I just did it because that's why my calling is. They don't have that, and it's okay. They want to be W-2s, and there's nothing wrong with that. I can't work for you, man. It's just not part of my DNA.
Yeah.
You're asking me to be a lion, but I'm not a lion. I'm something else. Yeah. And I can pretend I am for a little bit when I'm growing, learning from your mistakes. But eventually, that flame is not yours, it's mine, and I have to deal with it.
You got it.
And they don't have that. And I've learned that. I thought everybody had this flame, right? And I'm saying, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to work for you. And it's not just because I want to be rich. Of course I want to be rich. Who doesn't want to be rich? But it's more than that. I want to have my own business. I want to be able to impact people. They don't want to do that. They want to go home at 5 o'clock and chill. And it's totally cool. But that's not my call. I'm in a play, and that's not my role in this play.
Yeah.
I need to do something else.
Oh, I'm all. I mean, that's.
So that's what I think a lot of entrepreneurs do that. It's not so much because I just want to be rich. And the problem with that is you have no idea. None of us do. And Steve Harvey says the best. You walk down this hallway, right? Door. But you don't know how long the hallway is. Before you know it, you're walking for a year, 2 years, 5 years. You had no idea that you were going to walk that long, and you still haven't achieved it. So that's when the sacrifice comes in, because then the wife is saying, "Well, you said 3 years. Well, you didn't know what you were talking about because you don't know what it is. It's not like structured already, right?
Yeah.
You're creating your own path. It could be 5 years. It could be 10 years.
Yeah, one of my favorite stories I've watched. Like, I was telling a group here in Gainesville a couple of weeks ago that one of my favorite ways of learning about public speaking is watching Steve Harvey.
Yes,
I mean,
he's awesome.
I love to watch Steve Harvey and his game shows and everything else. One of the things he said was that he was working for another company, and he walked into his boss's office and said, I'm quitting. And his boss, because he wanted to become a comedian.
Yeah.
And
thank God he did that.
Yeah, and his boss kind of talked him out of it, And so he went back outside, and his buddy said, "Hey, I thought you were cleaning out your desk. Here's that box." And he said, "No." And his friend took him aside and said to him, "Look, if you don't clean out that desk now, you never will."
Amen.
And so he went back in, and he said, "I'm leaving."
Correct.
And he went on to start him, because you have to find that thing yet you still have to find that balance. You know, you know, if you're destroying everything in your path to get your success, how successful are you? I go back to my friend Bill. Is the guy with 3 mortgages and 5 companies and, you know, $1 billion pension, is he more successful than the guy? And you said it best. It depends on what your definition of success is. Is it more successful than the guy that sits home and at night and helps his kids with their homework and has dinner with them every evening and pays his bills? And
but if Bill had the flame and he ignored it, I would argue that Bill is not a success.
Yeah,
because
the flame was built in another way.
Right, but I'm saying flame to be an entrepreneur. And if he avoided that flame and he did, I'm just going to be comfortable, I would argue that your friend Bill is a failure to himself, not to society.
So and this is great on leadership, Edward. And I love this conversation. Now, you said you had a couple of exes.
Yes.
So did the drive destroy that, or
it didn't help it?
Yeah. So
it didn't help it. Yeah.
So, you know, we were laughing about on the break about the Detroit Lions,
yes,
right? You know,
correct.
And you know, it's the old adage that, you know, the bully in the school, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So when your drive, it's great for you because you're pursuing your dream,
right?
But if you're killing everybody in your path,
right?
What is the good in that? I'm trying to discover that.
Well, there's 2 things. So when you're in your 20s and you're broke, you're supposed to be, right?
Okay, I'm not talking about your situation.
Oh, okay.
I'm talking about if no matter where we are in life, if our dream is harming other people, but it's satisfying us. Well, I think that's where our world has got to.
Well, it depends what harming means.
About me first.
Well, it depends what harming means, because if you mean like physical harming, of course, but I think most entrepreneurs, when they mean harming, is they don't provide enough money, because when you start a business, you may not have the cash flow that you need, right? So most people, when they say they're hurting your family,
I've never really worked for anybody else in my life. I have at small parts, but it still was. Yeah. It was entrepreneurial. My dad was an entrepreneur. Right. My uncle was. My grandfather was. Yeah. We've had nothing but business owners in our lives. So it's been that way.
But I can tell most of my friends are not that way. Most of the family's not that way. Yeah. You know, when I went to engineering school at UF, the whole thing was work for a company, right? Whether it's UPS with logistics or, you know, anything that supplies. I worked for Michelin, AT&T, and when I got there, I wasn't happy. Just like the guy in class, just like Raven, you know, Jose Raven. He was like, I'm not happy. And you can't just ignore that voice. Now, having said that, you may not be able to take that journey with somebody else because you may hurt them. But if you sit down with your loved one, like we had another guy say that about accounting. He sat down with his loved one and said, I'm not happy. Yeah. And they said, wait, you went to school, you have all this debt, you can't quit. You want me to die inside? Because I would argue that if you're in a relationship and your partner, it's okay with you dying inside to make the family better, they don't love you. They're not with you. That shouldn't be, you need to separate yourself, because if you're dying inside every day and they're okay with that, why are you here? So you need to be with someplace, because at the end of the day, it's just you and the mirror, man. Yep. And if you're not okay with what you see, I'm not talking about physically, your soul. Mm-hmm. Why are you here?
Yeah. Well, again, you know, it goes back to like things like sarcasm and jabs and one-liners, and if you're the type of human that looks at that and says, I love that about me, well, you know, then you need to get a new mirror, you know?
Right, it's your DNA. You can't change your DNA.
I don't think that's our DNA. I grew up in a very sarcastic family. My dad was probably one of the most sarcastic human beings I've ever met in my life.
No, I'm talking about sarcasm. Like the fire to be an entrepreneur. I think that you're born or you're not born with it.
Yeah, that is an interesting concept. That, you know, one of the things, going back to that entrepreneurial skills, when did you decide exactly that you were going to do? Because I have a friend of mine who was a student in Dale Carnegie class, right? And he was an engineer, right? And one day he came home from work, and he told his wife, he said, "Honey, I want to be a dentist."
Oh wow! Talking about 180.
Yeah, he's now my neighbor. He lives a couple of doors down from
me.
And
a dentist.
But he quit. And went back to medical school to become a dentist.
Wow.
And now he is part owner of a large dental firm and very successful. When did you know, what part of your life? Mine was probably when I was a teenager that I knew I wanted to have my own company. You know, I had a dream and a desire that someday I wanted to do something like that. When did it hit you?
So that's a good question. Mine's a little bit different. So when I started Hoops Galore, I've always loved basketball. I don't like basketball. I love basketball. I can watch high school basketball all day. I just love the game, right? So when I started Hoops Galore, I did it for the love of the game, just like Jordan has it for the love of the game, that he can play whenever he wanted to, any pickup game. Nobody can tell him when he could or could not play in case he hurts himself. The love of the game clause was there, and he can do whatever he wanted to, right? Similar to that. So I started Hoops Galore simply for the love of the game. I didn't know if I was going to make any money, but I wanted to do it, and I was hoping that I would be able to make some money. But with GCM was a little bit different. I actually worked at Michelin as an industrial engineer, and I got fired. So when Steve Harvey says jump, I got pushed.
Why did you get fired?
So the way that Michelin has it is they have 3 tests that you have to pass when you graduate. You go to Michelin University, and the 3 tests. I used to tell people I didn't pass the test. I thought it was like a drug test. It's not a drug test. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I never have in my whole life. So my only vice is sugar, chocolate, right? So, but they have 3.
Reese's peanut butter
exactly.
cups.
I've never been a good student. I've always had to work. Like graduating from UF with a 3.2, all I did was study. You know, I had friends that had a 3.2 in their sleep. They didn't have to take notes. They were just gifted. God gave them that gift. They didn't work for it, hence it's a gift. Just like I knew a guy that can jump 42 inches. Never did calf races, never did anything. God just blessed them. He did not bless me like that, right? Probably didn't bless you like that. Just everybody has a gift. School was never my gift. I had to really study. So when I went to Michelin, I didn't pass 3 tests. I missed the first one. I had to retake it. Take the second one, didn't pass it, 80 or better, like grad school. The 4th test, I passed the 3rd one. The 4th, I didn't pass it, so they automatically fire you, no questions. Yeah, it's tough. It has nothing to do how you perform in the industry. It just has
That's
to do.
when you decided to become an entrepreneur.
Well, no, I had already been an entrepreneur, and I was done with it. Because I had failed 3 times. And you know what? I truly love industrial engineering. I love making things. Like if you say, Edward, I want you to make this microphone, I would love that. I'd be like, okay, where do I get the parts? How do I get the people? How do I make as many Six Sigma? I love making things. Now, the mechanical, I won't be able to do that because I'm not a mechanical engineer, but nor do I care. The electricity behind it, I don't care about that. I just want to make the gadget, right? So when I was at Michelin, I was making tires, but I was making tires for airplanes. And then when they let me go, fired me, I moved back to Florida. This is in North Carolina. And I didn't want to do it. I did not want to be an entrepreneur anymore because I had failed so many times. I wanted to be more stable. And I applied, but in 2011, 2010, the economy was not very good. So nobody was hiring me. So September of 2011, I came up with the idea of gift certificates and more. And I'm like, I have been unemployed for 9 months. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to run with this. I already learned from my restaurant, you know. I already learned from working as an industrial engineer processes. And then back then there was no apps. It was just websites. So I bought the domain and I started knocking on doors. And a lot of people told me, you're crazy. No one's ever going to give you a gift certificate, right? And I'm like, no, I need a gift certificate. I'll give you a coupon. It's like I'm the one that started the gift certificate thing. Obviously, I didn't create the gift certificate, but I'm the one that put it in this form because I knew from the loop that they could take a $3 hit and not kill themselves. And it's 1 redemption per person, per place, per month. So I was always protecting the restaurant. And they got to think, a lot of them told me, this is the stupidest thing, it will never work. 11 years later, I'm still doing it.
Yeah, amazing to me.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that spirit that you know, that you just keep on going with a great idea. We have about a minute and a half to go here.
Okay.
Quickly, give me one trait of a leader. If you were to suggest to people one trait, just one trait of a leader, what would that be that people would have to instill in themselves?
And this goes back to your course, which I'm learning a lot from. Truly, truly care.
Care about other people. Yeah. You know, somebody said that the other night, didn't they? I think it was James Peace. He talked about
Greatest last name ever.
When he started thinking about leadership, and it was on what was the word he used? It was reprimanding.
Yep.
He thought of leaders as reprimanding, and he learned that leadership is about caring.
That's all it is.
You know, and that's.
But like I told you in
amazing
class,
thing.
sometimes that's hard to do.
Yeah.
You know, because in order to care about you, in a kind of a little way, I have to like want to get to know you and maybe even love you a little bit. Because if I don't love you at all, don't care about you, don't like your personality, I'm not really going to care about you.
Yeah.
But you got to find, like, why is he being this way?
Yeah.
You know, you have to peel back the onion. And then when you get to the core, that's what people appreciate. They'll be like, oh, thanks for caring.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. That's an interesting
And you'll do more
concept
for that. I know I will do more for you if you care, if you don't.
I appreciate your time here.
Appreciate you, my brother.
Man, it was nice to have you
I'll
on
see you
here.
Tuesday.
Oh, definitely, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tammy, Jason. Appreciate it, man. Peace to you all. And this is Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the Coach's Podcast Room. See you next week.